the moment the vault door flew open, and two armed guards stormed into the room. They were led by Mundo, the head of Nzande family security. Long before the rise of the great cities, the ancestor of Nzembala told tales of a gift from the heavens, a shimmering stone said to possess powers beyond mortal comprehension. The Moonstone was not just a jewel, it was the heart of the kingdom itself, the life force that bound the land to universe. Its glow could revive withering crops, heal the sick, and protect the people from evil. But like all great powers, the Moonstone came with a warning. Its magic was not to be used recklessly, nor could it ever be removed from its resting place in the sacred mines beneath the Kingdom of Nzembala. The elders, the keepers, were entrusted with guarding the stone, ensuring its safety and its proper use. For centuries, the stone's power remained untouched, a silent sentinel to prosperity of the land. Yet over time, as it the way with things of great power, greed began to fester. Some believed the Moonstone's magic could be harnessed to control the land, to make the wielder invincible. In the dark corners of Nzembala, whispers of betrayal and theft began to spread. Gano, the last keeper of the Moonstone, understood these dangers more than anyone. He had seen the land wither during the great droughts and watched as rebels plotted in the shadows, seeking the Moonstone's power. He knew that if the stone were ever taken from its resting place, the very fabric of kingdom would unravel. But even he could not stop the inevitable. It was the dead of night when the theft happened. The moon hung high in the sky, a dim crescent barely visible behind a shroud of clouds. The winds that once carried the scent of fresh rains were now dry, as if the land it was holding its breath. Gano, the keeper of the Moonstone, sat in the sacred chamber within the heart of Moonstone mines. He had always felt a strange pull when guarding the stone, a mix of reverence and anguish. Tonight, however, there was something more, an unsettling stillness in the air. From the darkness of the vault, the Moonstone's faint glow illuminated the chamber, casting a light across the stone walls. Gano closed his eyes, deep in prayer, asking for Strange to protect the stone one more time. But when he opened them, the stone was gone. A thief had entered the vault undetected, skillfully bypassing every trap, every lock. The only clue left behind was a faint footprint in the dust, leading toward the dark tunnel that led out of the mines. "By the heavens," Gano whispered, rushing toward the empty pedestal. The land trembled slightly under his feet. Follow. He sprinted out of chamber, calling for help, but it was too late. The thieves had already escaped into the night, and with the Moonstone in their possession, the land was already beginning to die. Kwezi, a young boy of 15, lived on the outskirts of Nzembala's capital. He wasn't the kind of child who sat still to listen to the elders' stories about the Moonstone. He preferred exploring the thick forest, collecting herbs, and running through the fields, his legs pumping as he imagined the world beyond the village. But on the night the Moonstone was stolen, Kwezi felt a shift in the air. The elders gathered in concealed chambers, their faces drawn with worry. The Moonstone's theft wasn't just loss of a powerful artifact, it was the unraveling of their kingdom's very foundation. The first sign of the curse was subtle. Crops, once lush and green, began to wilt. The river banks, which had once been full and flowing, started to dry up. Animals that had roamed the forest for generations began to retreat into deeper shadows. The people grew afraid, whispering of a curse that had been foretold in their ancient texts. Kwezi overheard the elders speaking of the thief, the Nzandes. One of them muttered, "They must have taken it. No one else had the means to steal the Moonstone." The Nzandes was a powerful, wealthy family in the capital. They had always coveted the Moonstone's power, and it was said that they had connection to some of the most dangerous criminals in Nzembala. Kwezi felt a fire ignite within him. He may have been just a boy, but the elder's fear was his fear, and he could not longer stand idly by. "I will find the thief," he declared, stepping into the room where the elders gathered. "I know the land better than anyone. I can track them." Gano, the last keeper, looked at him with a mixture of disbelief and hope. "This task is beyond you, Kwezi. It's dangerous. You would be better off staying in the village." But Kwezi wasn't one to back down. He had always felt there was something greater waiting for him, and this was his chance. "I may be young, but I have the heart of true adventure. Please let me help." Reluctantly, Gano agreed, and so the journey began. Together they would venture into the unknown, with nothing but the courage and faint hope of finding the Moonstone before the curse destroyed everything. The air was thick with the smell of decay as Gano and Kwezi traveled deeper into the wilderness of Nzembala. The once vibrant landscape now seemed lifeless, the trees withered and fields barren. Kwezi's heart sank as he realized the curse was real, and it was spreading fast. Gano moved with purpose, his withered face set in grim determination. He had lived through wars, droughts, famines, the ebb and flow of time, but never he had felt the land so fragile. The Moonstone's absence was already affecting the very earth beneath their feet. "I can feel it," Gano muttered, his voice low. "The land is in pain. If we don't find the Moonstone soon, Nzembala will die." Kwezi glanced nervously at him. "How far do you think the thief has gone?" "Too far. The Zondes are already aware of the stone's power. They'll try to sell it to the highest bidder, and we may have to face more than just the Zondes to get it back." The pair moved quickly, navigating through dense foliage and rugged terrain. They knew that the thief could be anywhere. Gano's mind was constantly racing, calculating every possible move. He had been a part of the kingdom's defense for decades, and this was the first time he felt truly vulnerable. As they neared the capital, the signs of the curse became more apparent. The air felt thick, suffocating even. The distant hills that once cradled the city now seemed to retreat, their slopes dark and ominous. Gano stopped suddenly. "We are close. The Zondes have hidden in the city. We must be careful. They have eyes everywhere." Kwezi nodded, but his mind raced. He had always heard stories of Zonde family, stories of power and corruption, but nothing could have prepared him for the reality that lay ahead. The capital city of Nzembala was a sprawling labyrinth of narrow streets, grand merchant hall, and towering structures made of sandstones. It was a city that pulsed with wealth, power, and intrigue. It was here that Zondes had their stronghold. Kwezi and Ganos infiltrated the city under the cover of night, disguised as traders selling herbs and spices. They knew the Zondes would be watching, but the night offered them their best chance to blend in. The auction where the Moonstone was being sold was set to take place at the merchant's lord's palace, a sprawling complex of gold, marble, and ivory. The auction house was an open courtyard, crowded with the richest families in Nzembala, all greedy to outbid each other for the treasure that had come from all corners of the world. Kwezi's eyes darted across the crowd, taking in the opulence. He had never seen anything like it. Furs, silk robes, and elaborate jewelry. The very air buzzed with tension, a mixture of excitement and greed. But in the center of the room, atop a pedestal, was Moonstone. It pulsed faintly, its glows almost imperceptible in the bright lights of the auction hall. But Kwezi felt its pull. His heart quickened. He could sense the power emanating from it. And deep down, he knew the Moonstone was not just a jewel, it was the key to everything. "Let's move," Gano whispered, pulling Kwezi toward the shadows. They made their way to the vault where the Moonstone was being kept until the auction began. But just as they reached the door, they were confronted by a servant, a young woman with a wary look in her eyes. She seems to know they weren't supposed to be here. "Who are you?" she demanded. Gano stepped forward, speaking with authority. "We are traders. We are here to offer some of our wares to the Lord." The servant didn't seem too convinced. "You are not from here," she muttered, her eyes narrowing. "I'll report you to the guards." Before Gano could respond, Kwezi's instincts kicked in. Without thinking, he grabbed a nearby jar of powdered herbs and tossed into the air. The jar exploded with a sharp puff, sending a cloud of sleep-inducing powder into the air. The servant collapsed to the ground in a heap. Gano looked at Kwezi, wide-eyed. "Impressive," he said, though his tone was filled with unease. "Let's go," Kwezi whispered. The door to the vault creaked open, revealing the Moonstone on the pedestal, bathed in soft, overvaulted light. Kwezi felt a sense of awe as he stepped inside, but Gano was not as mesmerized. "The Moonstone is more dangerous than you think," Gano said quickly, his eyes scanning the room. "If we take it, we risk unleashing its curse." Kwezi nodded, his hands trembling slightly as he reached for the Moonstone. But just as his finger brushed the stone, the sound of footsteps echoed in the hallway outside. "We've been discovered," Gano hissed, pulling Kwezi toward the shadows. At the moment, the vault door flew open, and two armed guards stormed into the room. They were led by Mundo, the head of Zonde family security. "I knew you would come for it," Mundo sneered. "Did you think you could steal the Moonstone without consequences?" The battle was swift and brutal. Gano stepped in front of Kwezi's, his body a shield as Mundo's men lunged. Kwezi dodged to the side, trying to make a grab for the Moonstone. But as his fingers brushed against it, a terrible force surged through the room, a wave of energy so strong that it knocked everyone off their feet. The Moonstone pulsed with a brilliant, chaotic light, its glow now blinding. The ground trembled and the walls cracked. Kwezi gasped, feeling the stone's power coursing through him. It was both terrifying and exhilarating. He could hear the whispers of ancients, a distant voice calling to him. Gano shouted over the chaos, "Kwezi, drop it!" But it was too late. Kwezi held the Moonstone in his hand, feeling its power surge through his veins. As Kwezi held the Moonstone, he felt a deep connection to it, as though it had recognized him as a true keeper. The curse that had been dormant for so long began to awaken. The ground cracked open, and the deep, booming voice echoed through the palace halls. "You've disturbed the balance of the land." The place began to collapse around them, walls crumbling as the land outside the capital began to die, the once lush fields turning to dust. But in that moment of destruction, Kwezi knew what he had to do. With Gano's guidance, he placed the Moonstone back into the sacred pedestal, returning it to a rightful place. The power of a stone calmed. The land began to heal, and the curse was lifted. The sun set over Nzembala, casting a line shadows across the fields that had once threatened to wither under the curse. The land had been renewed, its life restored, and the Moonstone's glow once again illuminated the sacred mine, untouched and whole. Yet a feeling lingered in the air, as the Moonstones were not entirely at peace. Kwezi stood at the edge of the mine, staring into the glowing depths of the cave. The elders had returned to their duties, and the people resumed their lives, but Kwezi's heart remained restless. The Moonstone was safe for now, but its mysteries were far from unraveled. "Do you ever wonder?" Kwezi asked, his voice soft, "if the Moonstone will call to us again?" Gano, now much older and wiser, glanced at boy who had become his protege. "The Moonstone is a force that cannot be fully understood by mortal hands," he replied. "It's tied to the land, yes, but it's also tied to something greater, something that exists beyond our reach." Kwezi nodded, his gaze fixed on the shimmering glow below. But one day someone might come for it again, and we'll have to stop them. Gano's eyes darkened. The Moonstone chooses its keeper, he said, his voice low, and it will choose when the time is right. Be ready, Kwezi, for one day you may face a choice much bigger, much greater than any we've known. The wind picked up, rustling the leaves of the acacia trees surrounding them. It seems to carry with a whisper, a distant and haunting, like the sound of the Moonstone calling to those who would listen. As the night grew deeper and the stars twinkled above, Kwezi understood. This was not the end of the story, but only the beginning. The Moonstone's power, its legacy, would stretch beyond their lifetime, and Kwezi, the boy who had been once accused of the theft, was destined to play a far greater role in the unfolding tale of Nzembala. For the Moonstone was not just a stone, it was a symbol of fate, of choice, and of the eternal balance between light and dark. And its story was far from finished. I'm Kaya, and I'm grateful for your support today. If you enjoyed the story, please like, subscribe, and share your thoughts below. Sweet farewells until we meet again.